Greetings and hello. Welcome to the season 2 of the PLP Pathways webinar series. This is our third broadcast of the year. My name is Don Taylor, and I teach language arts and social studies at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier. And the PLP Pathways project is supported by the Middlebury Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. My collaborators on the call are going to introduce themselves.
I can go first. Hi, I'm Maura Kelly. I'm a 7th and 8th grade humanities teacher at People's Academy Middle Level in Morrisville, Vermont.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Hallman. I work on the Edge Academy team at Essex Middle School with 7th and 8th graders. I'm a generalist.
Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. I work at U32. I teach 9th, 9th grade and senior anatomy.
Okay. So again, today a webinar, we have a tentative agenda. And I know that I just want to mention this before we go too much further, that this evening there's a VT Ed chat on Twitter. I don't know if people have been following that, but the focus of tonight's discussion is on student-led conferences. And Maura and I actually just finished an episode for we do a pre-recorded episode as part of this project, and we actually had a long conversation about about student-led conferences, and that's actually on our YouTube channel, and we tweeted that out as well. So if people are interested in seeing that before the VT Ed chat or actually joining the VT Ed chat, just know that it's about student-led conferences. So our agenda today was to talk about maybe personalization, about where people are, current activities, maybe to reflect on that. We also wanted to talk about proficiencies and personalization. And if there's anybody out there, we do have 3 viewers. And prior to starting the live broadcast, Lindsay Hallman from the Edge Academy was talking about proficiency-based learning and standards-based learning, which was that's somewhat connected to our agenda item. And I think, Lindsay, we might want to start talking about that right away, as you mentioned that there are some big conceptual ideas behind that. Also, if we get to it tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit more about extended learning opportunities and flexible pathways. And then there's a lot of professional development opportunities that are cropping up. So I'd like to make sure that we leave folks with that information as well. And does that sound right? Did anybody have anything to add?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay. Good. So we had talked about proficiency and personalization, and as part of the model that we're now using, which was designed by the Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute, we've been talking about this idea of 3 pillars of personalization. 1 is the personal learning in the PLP, 2 is proficiency-based learning, and the 3rd one is the flexible pathways or the extended learning opportunities, which allow kids to extend their learning outside of the classroom with a variety of opportunities. Now, Lindsay brought to the table some discussion that occurred at the Middle Grades Collaborative most recent meeting. And Lindsay, do you want to introduce that and talk about that and what that means in terms of the personalization and proficiency-based learning aspects of Act 77?
Yeah. The hardest part of understanding how the 3 pillars all work together is this idea that with the proficiency-based learning, that within that, integrated into that, is the flexible pathways and the patient. I think that it's easier for people to conceptualize proficiency-based learning, that there's many teams and schools that are working on creating learning targets and looking at the proficiencies and understanding how we can ensure that our learners are moving towards demonstrating proficiencies. But the concern that, we had a long conversation around this idea that how is this different from when, many people went to standards-based assessment and learning, that we're still, there's still kind of that we're all doing this one activity or this one task to demonstrate proficiency. And what's different about Act 77 is the 2 other pillars that I think it's hard for people to understand because there are not a lot of concrete examples out there of what it would look like in a proficiency-based learning environment when flexible pathways and personalization are very much at the forefront. And so we had been talking about finding very specific examples of this in the field so that people can either talk to it or share it in some way, and maybe that's a piece that can be added to the blog. And I think that in order for us to move forward in the middle grades, we really need to start seeing some examples of how we can make this happen. What would it look like if I have 20 students in my class and we're working towards this proficiency, and here's a menu of proficiencies and you choose these to, and you have to demonstrate a certain level of proficiencies throughout this unit. What is that going to look like in the classroom and the learning environment? I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. And I've actually thought about this quite a bit, and I'll let Maura pipe in just a second. And I'm going to say this because I believe it, and it probably is not going to make some people happy, but I think what's happening is that proficiencies are leading the Act 77 initiative, right? Everybody's so concerned about proficiencies, and rightly so. There are skills that kids need, and they need to demonstrate their growth and learning over time. But when we allow proficiencies to drive the curriculum, we're not changing anything. That's not increasing engagement. It's not increasing motivation. It's not capturing kids who can leave the school, right? And who can become experts in all these different things that they're interested in, that they can demonstrate proficiency in that, but we're not capturing that. And so by that, I mean, if a kid is a really good skateboarder, right? And they create a tutorial video on how to ollie, for example, and they bring that back into the classroom, to me, that's demonstrating proficiency in the transferable skills. But what came first was knowing that kid and knowing what they were an expert, what they were good at, and then allowing them to demonstrate their proficiencies through their interests, right? Now, what the issue with that is, I think, is that teachers say, well, I have 45 kids, I'm going to have 45 different activities going on. And that becomes very, very difficult and overwhelming. And so I look at it as you have to create I call it internal flexible pathways, where you have to have activities in your classroom that are driven by personalization, but allow for the exhibition of proficiencies in a wide range of student interests. And jump in if you think I'm not making sense. But one of the things that we've really emphasized on our team is we have this green team, a section of our curriculum, which is every Monday, the kids break into committees and they do activities related to sustainability, related to reducing our waste stream, related to understanding the environment and understanding the issues with the environment. And each kid has a role on those committees. And through that work, we asked them to demonstrate proficiencies. But what we started with was their interests and what they want to do. And then we apply the proficiencies to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's exactly what I was speaking to. That's, I think, the biggest concern is that we're not going to see much change in our practice and change in the system if we don't look at it in a different way, because it's just going to be doing the same thing, but now with just kind of a different name.
Right. And I mean, I think Allison can attest to this. If you look at the history of education, I mean, that's what's happened over and over and over again. We rename or rebrand these initiatives, but then we end up reverting to the mean or reverting to what we all know and not actually changing what's going on. And so out of the conversation that you had, what were some of the thoughts related to this idea of personalization leading or proficiencies leading?
Well, I think you just spoke to some of that around the different structures that people are, how people are kind of reimagining their time and their space with kids. And I think that's a big part of it too. So like, for instance, an example on our team, we have a project block, and that's 90 minutes every other day, where kids are designing projects around, this theme that they've agreed on together, but connected to, we have different areas that it's connected to, but it's really their own personalized project. They might work with other peers, but they're demonstrating proficiency in the transferable skills in other content specific areas too, but they're engaged and they're excited and they're having real world relevant experiences because they have chosen their pathway, and they are working with members of the community and understanding what it means to make positive change in the community. So I think that's an example of how you can take all three and weave them together. Otherwise, I think we're going to be, I think what happened first and is that we began with the PLP because that was very concrete. We could support kids around setting goals, thinking about, career opportunities in the future, and demonstrating evidence on their PLP of their work towards their goals. Like that was an easy one for us to start with, an easy kind of avenue into this Act 77 journey. And then we came together and said, wait, it's not just the PLP, it's all three together. And I think this is going to be the biggest challenge for us as educators, is figuring out what does that look like in our current structures, and how do we need to change the structures and re-envision or imagine those structures in order to make this work. If we don't change something, it's just going to be, just like you said, Don, we're just going to have a new name for the same thing we've been doing.
Right. And Maura, your thoughts?
So one of the things that I've really been struggling with, so we have one of the changes that we made as a school was creating this opportunity time for all students at the end of the day. And so that's the time when we have students working on their personal projects, and they're connected with younger students, and they're doing, they're really choosing their pathway, and the teachers helping to negotiate and build a plan with the student and the parents around what that time looks like. But it's working because we're given that time and space. And I think one of the challenges that I'm finding is, like in my core classroom, when I know I have 55 minutes and there are certain things that I have to do without having that flexibility, like without me having flexibility for the scheduling, I feel like I'm having a hard time seeing it happen in the core classroom. And maybe I'm not aware, but I'm having a really hard time of trying to figure out how do I make it work within my core class, especially when I have half of the 8th graders and the other 8th grade class is doing something else. And, those are the sort of conversations. And so I think, as we're thinking about it, there are some systematic changes that need to happen to give teachers the space to have their own flexibility to create pathways for their students. And so I think it is one of those big school transformation conversations. And unless those things start changing, it's going to be really, in my mind, difficult to find the space to do this well.
Okay. Allison, do you have some thoughts?
Yes, I have many thoughts, John. I cannot echo enough what you all are saying. Speaking from, I'm in a school right now that put all efforts into proficiency-based learning and hoping, or somehow has a vision in mind that I don't know of embedding the other two later on. It's coming off as is 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the only thing that's different. Our letters have become numbers, and learners feel that, teachers feel that, parents feel that, so that calls and transformations within the school happen. We just got an email the other day about thinking about courses for next year, and that was just such a mirror moment. Why, we're putting so much emphasis on courses. Why aren't we talking about? And we're still talking about credits, and yes. So I just cannot echo what you all have been saying enough. Overhaul changes need to occur in order to do this successfully.
Well, I want to jump in there too. Just putting on like the struggling teacher hat. We have I've talked about this many times and a model sort of is developing in my head where I know that Lindsay, jumps full into the student negotiated curriculum. And what I'm trying to do is restructure my program so that kids come in and, we have some units structured so that they complete some, there's some basic proficiencies that they learn and can understand and demonstrate. And I call that sort of teacher-led, right? But the idea is that we move to student-led or student-driven curriculum over the course of the year. And the sooner that those kids get into the engagement piece, the sooner that they can choose this. If I have kids who've already written argument and explanatory and a narrative, then we can say, okay, here's what do you want to study? And then how are you going to choose to demonstrate your learning? And then a kid has a whole toolbox that they can already choose that they've already done once. And the way I'm looking at it is that they can then choose how they want to demonstrate their learning. But I guess the concern is, so we're moving through the curriculum and I'm trying to get to that student negotiated piece. And then all of a sudden you have something that occurs like the presidential election. And you're like, well, wait a minute, now our key question for the whole year is what are the disruptions that affect systems and cause change, right? Well, that was a big disruption, to the system, right? And now we have to go back and look at the system, which is the constitutional government, but then it becomes all teacher driven. You know what I mean? It's hard to say, and maybe Lindsay, you could help me out, but it's hard to say when, I need to have all my kids understanding, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the structure of our government, and how do you do that in a personalized way? And now I'm in this middle of this teacher-driven curriculum, and it just feels really like hard and difficult. And I'm like coaxing kids to want to care, as opposed to having the kids be intrinsically motivated. And I think that there's probably a lot of teachers out there who are feeling that same way. And is there a middle road or a middle path where I can ensure that kids know these basic ideas about civics and citizenship and the rights that they have and how those might change or be impacted? At the same time, allowing kids to personalize their learning and to research things that they're interested in. And so I agree, Lindsay. I think it's a big issue. And I mean, I've seen this, I kind of saw it a mile away. When you look at the graphic that the AOE has out and it shows proficiencies on one side and personalization on the other, and the PLP is kind of way down at the bottom, and so you just kind of wonder where the emphasis is. I guess my question is, how do you think PLP Pathways can help support teachers who are struggling with these issues? And what do you think that teachers need to figure this out? Like, can the panel give me maybe examples that would help either your practice or provide resources that teachers could use?
Well, I was just thinking about the dilemma that you just brought up and how, one approach to that could be a little different, because I think it's not an all or nothing situation. And that's the beauty of the negotiated curriculum piece, is that we know that there are certain areas that we need to, there's certain content that we need to provide our students with in order to be engaged citizens and also to be engaged members of the classroom community. And so, but we need to be able to find ways to share that information by also honoring that there are ways for them to then demonstrate their understandings and their learnings that might be different. So I think so it doesn't have to be all or nothing, teacher directed or student directed. There's some days it might look a little more like we're all talking together, and some days it might look like we're off doing some different, research, and some days it might, I think, just providing a number of different learning opportunities, I think that's important too, especially in the middle grades. And, we just did this big, again, the same thing, like the election took over for good reason. And I'm really glad that it did. We did a big mock election project, and researched, what is a democracy? What does it mean to be a citizen? And looked at it from that angle. And then our students put on a mock election here at our school, and then they're creating documentaries of an area of interest from that day using the media that they created. So, I mean, there's part of it that's still like, I have a vision for skills, and that I feel are really important for our kids, and I know are necessary for the kids to show proficiency in, but at the same time providing them with a lot of choice and different avenues for their learning. But there still is that time where there needs to be a foundation and a grounding so that there's a common language, and people are, able to have these discussions and feel like they can be engaged. So, and I'll stop talking in a second because I can talk too much, but to answer your other question, Dawn, about what can we do for educators, is that people need to see concrete examples, provide more examples of how this can look in different types of learning settings. So like when I'm just the science teacher in an 8th grade team, what might this look like? Or if I'm on a really integrated team, what might this look like? So everything, they need to see many different examples, and also that it's not all or nothing. It's that you need to find the balance, and a way that all three of those pillars can work together. I also think that teachers need to feel empowered to make changes and feel okay with trying things out. And it might look messy at first because it feels uncomfortable, but teachers need to take these chances, and we need space in order to do that. If we want Act 77 to be truly around personalization and flexible pathways in a proficiency-based learning environment, then people need to have the space and the time to try out these things that are maybe, put people a little bit, make them feel uncomfortable because it's not what we experience, what we're used to. We're creatures of habit. We don't change doesn't feel good. Teachers tend to be, what feels good for us is what we share. But I think we need to have the space and the time to try things out.
I'm really glad that you said something about teachers feeling empowered. Sorry, do you hear that echo?
Not anymore.
Okay. I'm glad that you said something about teachers feeling empowered to make this change, because I think teachers in general are so hard on themselves, and I'm so guilty of it too. Like, am I doing the right thing? Are they learning enough? Are the kids happy? Like, what's going on? And also feeling like, well, are the parents going to like this? Is the other team going to be okay that I'm doing this? Or, what are the questions? Or what if all of a sudden I get into it and it's not rigorous enough for my kids? I know, you know what I mean? So I think that we need to allow ourselves, and I think as a schools need to be supportive in allowing their teachers to try these different pieces. And I think, Lindsay, what you were saying, it's really reassuring, I would imagine, because it really is this spectrum, right? Like there are days that it is teacher directed because that's how the content is being delivered, or this is what the requirement is. For example, we just had our on-demand writing prompt. That has to be we all have to write our personal narrative. Like we can choose our topic and our moment from our lives, but that's something that I have to do. I don't have the choice of saying, no, you can't you can do something else. Feel free to go, build a replica castle at this time. Like we all have to write our personal narratives. And so we are in this shifting times where sometimes it's going to feel like we've released more of the control, and other times we are in more of the control. And so I think it's just, we need to support each other, and we need to be given space and time and really allow ourselves to try something. And even if it might not feel good, be reflective practitioners and make changes along the way. And it's a very, I think, and maybe it's just me, but I think as a teacher, the emotional side of it can sometimes psych you out of making changes. But you have to, like, it's finding those partners. Like, who else in the building can you bounce an idea off of? Who can you talk to if you don't have a strong person on your team who is also trying these same things? because it's through those conversations that you'll find the strength to try something new, or reflect on something that maybe didn't go very well and get yourself back on track. Because I think it's a huge change in practice, and it happens very small steps.
I mean, those are all really good points. I mean, you've got me thinking, because I'm right in the thick of it and struggling, really struggling to figure out. I mean, there's some, and the problem is that I have these questions that kids are coming up with or thinking about that are kind of circling me. So one of the questions was, what is a right? And another question was, what's the difference between a freedom and a right? And so I'm sitting there going like, oh my gosh, we should just study, we should chunk out times in American history and have them study something that involves, rights or freedoms, and that way they would have that personalized, they could just study something they're interested in. But then how do you move away from the linear part of it and make sure that even the kids who are struggling, get what at the end of the day, they get the information that they need or the skills that they need. And I think that you're both right, is that we have to really take risks and take chances. And the other thing is, I think we have to change our conception of time. Instead of, I still feel like, well, I got to get here, right? Yeah. And what happens if you don't give kids a linear story, like a linear narrative? And what happens if you, and maybe we should just, I don't know. I mean, it's just taking that leap and saying, what do you guys want to study? And then how do you structure that? Because I've been here, I've been at this point on the cusp of this for probably 2 years now, in the cusp of moving to a really student negotiated curriculum. And I haven't quite figured out how to do it. And so, and again, Lindsay, I think as you mentioned, there's a lot of constituents out there that we have to be concerned with, parents, the learners themselves, obviously, and making sure that our kids are prepared for moving forward. I think that the biggest thing that helps me is talking to you guys. I show up at these webinars and I get a couple ideas, and it's just really helpful to know that other people are out there and working through this. I guess this is the last question on this, is to everybody, is at what point do you think, if proficiencies are taking over and people see this as more of the same, at what point do you think some of these initiatives lose steam or lose their momentum? And what can we do to prevent that from happening?
I can give you my perspective on it. I think one of the things is that it's really hard, and to not have the time and the support, and also be a learner yourself, because it really is, it's like we're all learners right now trying to figure this out. And one of the things that I'm on the curriculum council for my school district, and I would say the levels of frustration right now of teachers who are working, a lot of teachers you'd ask are feeling like they're working harder than they have in a very long time, replanning the curriculum and trying to make changes. And so our district has sort of thought ahead of this. And so they're offering, it's a course. You're essentially taking a course with other teachers in the district, and it's to scaffold and support teachers in making transformational shifts in their classroom. And teachers are being given time and supported and taking on the learner role to really be able to make these changes and also be accountable for it. Because I think it's very easy to slip back into something that feels routine or comfortable, or, we've always done the Utopia unit or whatever it is. And so I think there's the accountability piece as well, but also making sure that everyone in the building and everyone in the school has a strong foundation in, like, what does proficiency-based learning mean? Like, what does it look like? Because there is a lot of sort of content knowledge that comes along with that topic itself. And so I think it's just making sure that there's the time, space, and support to make that happen.
Okay. Well, again, this is a good conversation. I think it's one that's going to carry on for for quite a while, at least throughout the year. And I'm sure if it's coming up at the middle grades, in those discussions of the middle grades collaborative, they're hearing it from their practitioners and they're hearing it from the people who are out in the field. So we'll definitely revisit that. I do have some nuts and bolts items that I want to talk about real quickly. And some of those revolve around, okay. So I want to talk real quick about some professional learning opportunities. And if you guys have any additional ones, please feel free to jump in. The first one is there is a personal learning for common good conference that's happening at Randolph Union High School, I believe, and in partnership with the Rowland Foundation and Up for Learning. And that's happening on December 1st. And I believe that's around Act 77 and the community. So you can Google that. Again, that's personal learning for the common good. That sounds like a really good opportunity to talk more about flexible pathways, proficiencies in those three pillars. Also on, and again, that's December 1st, and that's called Personal Learning for the Common Good. Also, the middle grades collaborative, the conference is on Saturday, January 7th, and this focuses on middle level educators, but this too will be a great opportunity to meet up with folks. If you did go to the Middle Grades Institute, or if you're interested in any of these issues or topics, you can register for that at the Middle Grades Collaborative website. And that's a great way to reconnect with some of your colleagues. And I think it really helps too to get recharged sort of for that winter teaching period. And then also I just want to—
John, if people haven't been to the—
What's that?
Sorry, if people haven't been to the Institute, are they still allowed to go?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes.
There'll be a variety of presentations there throughout the day. And it's just a really good way to kind of bone up on some of these concepts and see what people are doing. I think, as Lindsay mentioned, it really helps to see how other folks are working and progressing. And again, there'll be lots of presentations, lots of folks there who are really interested in working on these topics. And then also for middle level educators out there, the Middle Grades Institute is happening, I think, June 26th through the June 30th, I think, and that's at Champlain College. That's in 2017. So if you have colleagues or you know of people who would attend the Middle Grades Institute, now is a great time to think about registering, and registration is open for that as well. So those are just some professional development opportunities. Also, I went to the Vermont After School Conference, which was in Stowe on October 28th and or October 29th. And the Vermont After School Conference was dedicated to bringing ELO providers or like community connections, lots of different organizations who want to work with students on providing flexible pathways. They had 284 people attending the conference, huge turnout. They also have a pretty dynamic web page, and that's Vermont After School. You can Google that, and that looked like a great opportunity for creating partnerships in communities all across Vermont. So again, that's the Vermont After School program, and they have a Twitter, they have a web page, and they're really moving forward, trying to create partnerships with teachers around the state. So I guess one thing that I also wanted to talk about before we go here is, there's another barrier out there which we don't often talk about, which I think is technology and the use of technology and access to technology. I know that some of our viewers and some of our panel members are one-on-one with technology, but not everybody out there is. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about how you see technology playing a fundamental role in this work, and what kind of technology you're using, that would be great.
Well, we are one-to-one. Our whole school is one-to-one, and we have Chromebooks. And I mean, obviously, with that setup, makes things much more efficient. I mean, because we use Google Classroom for everything, and I like Google Classroom because it allows you to it gives you the opportunity to really look at your classroom in a different way. So I can push out, resources and information to small groups of students or one person, or so I just like the organization of Google Classroom. Also, with the one-to-one, kids can constantly be putting evidence on their PLPs or updating. They can be researching. I do feel fortunate that we are one-to-one and the kids have access. At the same time, I have used the model that we use on our team has been a model that we've used for 8+ years, and we haven't always had one-to-one. So having, the negotiated curriculum project-based learning model where it's really student-driven doesn't mean you have to have one-to-one technology. It does obviously make things more efficient. I feel like less time with dealing with, organizational things because the technology kind of helps you organize.
And Lindsay, quickly, how did you learn Google Classroom? I started using it this year, and I'm just kind of learning it on the fly. Do you have any recommended resources for folks out there who might want to learn more about it, or do you just Google it and see what you come up with?
Yeah, I pretty much had to kind of figure it out. My teammate and I on our own, so I've just been Googling it. I found a really good doc that I can share with you that was like a shared doc. Showed.
Uh-oh. Go ahead. Uh-oh. Maura, are you there?
I'm there.
Okay, I think we lost Lindsay. What about you guys? How are you using technology?
We are a one-to-one iPad school for our middle schoolers, 5 through 8. Everyone gets an iPad and they go home with the students, which for us is really important in terms of equitability and access to technology. And there are a lot of benefits to having an iPad in that it's inherently it's very personalized. So you sign in and you're in everything, but also a lot of the apps that they have are really wonderful for students using sort of multiple modes for communication and expression. One of the challenges, however, though, is like using Blogger on an iPad or Google Sites on an iPad. It's not very friendly. So we are having conversations about what that looks like.
Right.
If you've ever tried to use your own iPad to like write a paper, it's very difficult to do. But we believe pretty firmly in the capabilities that it has, sort of the creative side. So so that's what we're using right now.
And Allison, how about you guys?
Yes, we're a 7 through 12 one-to-one Chromebook, and I've just had it. In terms of the opportunities and choices for learners can make, it exponentially increases their ability to demonstrate their understanding through slides or docs, or there's just so many applications. The other day we were doing a tsunami project, and one learner figured out how to make his own map to document tsunamis over time and where they occur most frequently, and that's his product to show his understanding. On the flip side, I will speak to technology a little bit. I'm looking into what apps and technologies support personalization and proficiencies in this, and which ones are hindering it in terms of reporting out student progress. Some seem to be much more effective than others. So pros and cons to technology.
Are you talking about learning management systems or just apps?
Both. Yeah, which ones are more to learner, community, teacher, and which ones to do.
And are you guys using, do you have any recommendations for learning management systems that you've had success with?
So that's up to the teachers. Some teachers are using Google Classroom. Some are using Google Sites. Octopus are many.
Okay.
Work out, we use Infinite Campus.
Okay. All right. And then Maura, what are you guys using for a learning management system?
This is our first year as a school using a learning management system school-wide. Actually, we're district-wide using Schoology, and so that's what we've been using so far this year.
And how's that working for you?
I really like it. We've used Hapara, which really is not a learning management system, but more a way to share docs with students, more of a sharing system. And I really like using Schoology because you can tag your proficiencies to your assignments. And over time, you can see how your student is doing, and it gives you some really nice mastery tracking features. And so that's really great, but it is sort of another challenge learning a new program.
And are you also using Google Classroom?
No, we don't use Google Classroom.
So you only use, so Schoology is the only product that you're actually using with your students?
Right now, yep.
And do you have a website though that works with that?
Oh, what? Sorry.
A website. So do you have like a website where your students go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a website and then I have my personal blog, and on my blog, that's where I put my daily agenda. And so I put resources both on my daily blog because parents can access that as well, and in Schoology, which parents eventually will be able to access, but right now it's just students.
Okay.
Quick question more. How has the feedback been from learners and the community with Schoology now that you've changed to that new system?
I think we're still trying to gather that. I think one of the nature of 12 and 13-year-olds is when you're changing a system that was working, there's a lot of questioning of why are we doing this new thing, and they haven't really seen the mastery tracking yet because that's not the expectation for teachers in the building yet. I haven't heard anything negative from parents other than they can't see what's happening, but they really couldn't see what was happening before either. And so that's, that's just how it is. And I've heard that from maybe one teacher. It is a little tricky because we are a power school. And so the communication lines between Schoology and Power Teacher, which is where our grade book lives, is a little challenging. But hopefully with the shift to proficiency-based learning, we're going to be reporting in a very different way.
Okay. We're about at the end of the broadcast right now. I'd like to ask Maura and Allison and Lindsay if you could just stay with us. I'm going to stop the broadcast in just a second, but we just need to talk about a couple PLP Pathways things that I'd like to wrap up. I'd like to thank all of our panelists again for joining us. Again, this is very helpful. It gives me a lot to think about, and it gives me a lot of encouragement to hear that other folks are working through these issues and also trying as hard as they can to be the best educators they can be. Our next webinar is on December 15th. Maura will be hosting that webinar as I have a commitment out of town. And we hope that that this was useful for you. Any viewers out there, again, we are PLP Pathways. We're a teacher-led grassroots effort to develop professional learning and professional development to help folks with the 3 pillars of Act 77. We're supported by the Middle Grades Collaborative, the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. At the local level, we also have partnerships with Orca Media. I'd like to thank Allison, Lindsay, and Maura, and we'll see you December 15th. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter at PLP Pathways or on the web at plppathways.org. And for those of you viewing out there, don't forget also the Twitter conversations through VT Ed that are happening also involve many of these same issues. Thank you very much, and have a good night.